How did the devilish mix of Permanent V and Temp V change Butch's physiology? What are the interesting details of his new mutation? And why does the 5th episode of Season 4 only add confusion when looking for answers to these questions? We'll try to make sense of it all in this video on the most dangerous anti-hero, or maybe a straight-up antagonist at this point, of the boys' universe, Billy Butcher. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment down below, that's really important for me. So, Billy Butcher, that very guy who simply tells you what needs to be done, and you simply do it, since you just don't seem to have any other choice. But you know this about Billy Butcher from Season 1. Today, we'll pay closer attention to the 4th and to some extent the 3rd season. Yes, the climax of Season 4 proved to be more than impressive. Of course, in particular, I'm referring to what Billy promised himself in the end of Season 3, namely dealing with Victoria Newman. That's where we got the chance to see Billy's new mutation in its full glory, and also pick up on some key details. First, Billy's new mutation gives him a nauseous, sickly look, because, as we got to know in the beginning of the last episode, it is nothing other than super cancer. The internal conversation between Billy and Joe Kessler has shed some light on it. This is why the growth on his chest, from which all 8 of his tentacles spur, looks like a large and ugly, well, tumor, cause that's what it is. Remember in our Deadpool videos we said that according to some scientists, malignant tumors is an unsuccessful attempt of the evolution to create a regenerative mechanism inside a human body, which of course relates more to Deadpool himself, but in Billy's case this also seems to be true to some extent, since these tentacles spur out of his chest, tearing his flesh in the process and fully regenerating it afterwards. The need to rip the flesh first tells us that Billy's new mutation, having its own consciousness in the form of Joe Kessler, but more on that later, hasn't yet fully mastered the mechanisms to control Butcher's biology, which, by the way, did not prevent him from effectively dealing with far from the weakest soup out there, Victoria Newman. Second detail, in the moments when tentacles activate, so to say, Butcher is uncharacteristically unemotional. Remember his fight with Translucent, or again with Homelander. Now, what would that mean? Correct. In the moments when he activates his abilities to their fullest capacity, Butcher's brain is not the main organ of his nervous system anymore, but just an auxiliary one. The main organ of his nervous system now is the tentacles themselves and their intelligence and consciousness presented as Joe Kessler. Something akin to what happened in the case of Doc Ock, in fact. His new mechanical arms managed to take control over the nervous system because of the destroyed inhibitor chip, and in some part due to PTSD he had suffered. As a result, Doc Ock entered the state of mental agreement with his inner voice, that being the tentacle's intelligence. For Billy, everything is the same in this respect, the only difference being that his new limbs and their intelligence are not of technological but of chemical origin. All this aggravated manifold by Billy's tendency to listen to the voices in his head. It's been hinted at since the beginning of Season 3. Autonomous consciousness of the tentacles at these moments certainly benefits Butcher. After all, there are 8 tentacles and each of them assesses and controls the situation independently. This way, during these moments, Billy becomes emotionless because he reallocates the resources of his nervous system for the efficient operation of his organic tentacles. Yes, the analogy with Doc Ock's mechanical tentacles and the voices in his head works quite well here. But the question about the reasons of Billy's new mutation remains unanswered, specifically the interaction between Temp V and Permanent V. We know that Butcher has tried both of them. As we remember in Season 3, Billy crossed one of the red lines he marked for himself before, namely using Compound V, Temp V at that moment. Insufficiently tested, unpredictable, and radioactive on top of that. Although, as it turns out later, it was actually tested in quite a large test group, and the effects the test subjects experienced fell into 2 types: death and vegetative state. The reason was atrophy of the cerebral cortex as a result of rapidly growing tumors that strive to reach the cerebellum. In Billy's case, it's one large tumor, half of his brain in size, according to Joe Kessler's words anyway. So, what happened is that Temp V at that moment temporarily gave Butcher super soldier powers, bullet resistance, super strength, endurance, and as a bonus, thermal vision. But the main thing Temp V gave Butcher was the above-mentioned destructive brain disease, the symptoms of which, among other things, we'll observe as the cerebrospinal fluid of unnatural color that often flows out of Butcher's ears and nose. Yeah, rather unnatural indeed, and this can probably be attributed to other unpleasant pathological processes in Billy's body. Normally, cerebrospinal fluid itself is transparent and does not have odor. Billy has about a year to live, a year and a half if he's lucky. And at the beginning of Season 4, we learned that several months ago, as a last-ditch effort, Billy tried the Permanent V, the blue one, which as he assumed had no effect. But he was mistaken. In fact, Season 4 did not clearly explain the true nature of the interaction between Temp and Permanent V in Butcher's body. In particular, Episode 5 of Season 4 left this important detail unexplained, leaving us with more questions than answers. Butcher and the company go on to visit Newman's secret laboratory where the anti-soup virus is being produced. Billy sees a rabbit which had received a dose of Temp V. He lets the poor critter go, only to see it dying a little bit later. But most importantly, he will observe it exhibiting the same external anatomical symptoms as himself. Organic tentacles trying to tear everything around to shreds. We know that Permanent V has leaked from the lab and it reached the groundwaters, which is why the animals in the nearest farm have gone mad and became a serious danger. Now, is it that the rabbit received a dose of Permanent V, same as Butcher, mixing it with Temp V by being out of the lab for a short time? But we've clearly seen that this madness only affected the farm and the animals kept there. The rabbit was not kept on the farm. And thus, if the rabbit managed to get a dose of Permanent V, then thousands of animals living outside the farm should have gotten it too, and that would already pose a catastrophic danger to nearby cities, which obviously did not happen. This means, based on what was shown, should we be inclined to believe that the mutation in the form of tentacles is a consequence of Temp V, precisely what Butcher saw in the rabbit's case? Well, most likely no. Despite the above-mentioned logical inconsistencies, I tend to believe that the authors did mean that the rabbit got a dose of Permanent V in addition to Temp V having been outside the laboratory for a short time. After all, if such a mutation in the form of tentacles was a common symptom of exposure to Temp V, then it for sure should have been mentioned in those very notes on the test group, but it wasn't. This way, at this moment, you and me, well, rather only me, came to the conclusion that the appearance of tentacles is a hellish mix of Temp V and Permanent V. But Butcher is not a rabbit, believe it or not, he's a human. And the most interesting thing is that Permanent V has one very common symptom that manifests itself in people, and only in the strongest soups, and which will manifest in Butcher too. After all, the effect of both Temp V and Permanent V made Butcher a damn strong soup. Yes, he's capable of being one of the most powerful among those whom he hates the most. Of course, the symptom I'm referring to is the voices in the head as a result of taking Permanent V. Noir has it, and Soldier Boy, Homelander did, and even the Deep. But in the case of the last, it's only partially true. We'll talk about it sometime in a separate video about the Deep. And the development of this symptom, to which Butcher once again had a predisposition, played a huge role in saving his life. The fact is that the brain tumor that's forming as a result of using Temp V is intelligent. Yes, it has its own consciousness, but in the case of a rabbit and its primitive, by human standards, nervous system, the tumor is not able to make contact with its host, or maybe it just doesn't need to. Butcher, unlike the rabbit and other test subjects, has a symptom developed under the influence of Permanent V, voices in his head, and this way the tumor, personified by Joe Kessler, Butcher's former colleague, establishes a contact with him. Joe Kessler in this case is the voice of the tumor itself, and Joe Kessler agrees to keep Butcher alive and give him conscious control over his new powers, but only if Butcher in turn mentally agrees with him. Joe Kessler's personality is the personality of true Butcher, who'll stop at nothing to commit genocide on soups. Yes, exactly, genocide. Why does Joe Kessler need it? Because the intelligent tumor personified as Joe Kessler was created by Butcher as a consequence of taking Temp V for the sole purpose of destroying all soups. Thus, the effect of Permanent V on the body, which has already been exposed to Temp V, is not only the mutation of the tumor into the form of super cancer, which is manifested in the ability to use deadly tentacles. In Butcher's case, it's also the opportunity to communicate with his intelligent tumor. But one way or another, Billy Butcher's story is not one of an understudied mutation. It is a story about how there will be much more Soup's blood on his hands and especially tentacles. If you liked this video, be sure to support it with a thumbs up, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Your activity is essential to keep the channel alive. See ya!